Go.
Well, hello everyone, and we're here again today for another virtual library event. Today we have with us Dr. Heidi Bissariel. She is with the Capital of Texas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and she's going to be talking with us today about Home for the Holidays, 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that if you need either credit that you've been attending this event, make sure you go to the library website, find the events, and register for it. Then I'll remind you at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give the floor over to Dr. Heidi Bissariel. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here talking about such an important subject, which is Alzheimer's and all the other related dementia. I am a care consultant for the Capital of Texas chapter. And in my role, what I do is I try to raise awareness around disease and, do events like this, which for us are so important to not only reach our caregivers and people that are living with dementia, but the younger generation that inevitably we're all aging, and there's so many things that as we're aging, we can actually do to reduce the risk for Alzheimer's and other dementia. And so I wish when I was in college, someone would have grabbed me and said, let's talk about, aging and what can we do to mitigate some of the things that we know increase the risk of Alzheimer's. But more importantly, how do I detect it early? What we can do to detect the disease early on. And so what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of that. Okay, we're ready to do the screen share. And let's start. So today, yes, we're going to talk a little bit about, the 10 warning signs. These are signs that we know as we start to see some changes in thinking, we can identify as something that we want to make sure that we tell our doctors and that we know that they're different than just normal aging, right? So we compare things. We're going to talk about two things today. What would be normal aging and things that do look like signs of something, but they're just normal aging aspect, or what would be an actual sign that there's something that doesn't look quite right in our aging process. So yes, the importance of early detection. Patty is a diagnosed Alzheimer's patient. She was basically saying, and this is a little quote, that even if you would have known a little bit earlier what was coming, they would have appreciated to be able to do something about it, because the quality of life of someone that's living with Alzheimer's, and not just them, but their caregivers, is affected when we're not able to plan for the future and plan ahead. We're going to talk about a couple of people today, and they're going to let us know a few things, and we're going to hear from them. But we're going to start with Mary Ann, and she has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
With a disease that takes yourself, that's pretty scary stuff. And I think that the next wave of people, with the help of the association, the next wave of this disease is going to be to not be the only one who has it. That we're going to get comfortable enough, and if we who can speak enough, and people say, well, she's not shirking, she can put two words together, she's still living, she's still out there, he's still talking, she's still writing, and there are people doing all of this then I think the stigma, because that's a word we haven't said, will be lessened. I think it will be diminished. We don't blame people for having cancer. We don't turn the other way. We have historically done that with Alzheimer's disease. And I think that day is gone, and I think that we who live now and know about this are going to be part of the change.
It's encouraging to hear from someone that has been diagnosed early on, because I think it is true. There's a lot of stigma around the disease. We kind of don't do screeners, right? We don't tell our doctors this is happening. Is this normal? As early as we're 50 years old, right? But we do for other things, cancer and other health conditions. We raise our hand and we ask questions and we say, this is concerning, should I be worried? And as part of our annual checkup, our memory and our thinking should be something that if you're concerned about, you bring up. And so the importance of early detection is to allow for our caregivers to prepare, but more importantly, to allow the people that are living with Alzheimer's or other related dementia to say what they want in their treatment, or what they want in their in the financial planning or their care planning in general. They have a voice, and they're able to still relay specifically, what they want for their life and what they want to have in their care. And so early on, that's a good thing about being able to detect it early, is that you give them back the dignity that people should have to make decisions still on their own. We're going to talk about two things today, and it'll be divided into, we're going to talk a little bit about what is Alzheimer's, and then, of course, the 10 signs. When it comes to treatment, we're not going to talk a lot about that, because the treatment aspect is something that we're still working on. And there's a lot of research. So I will do an update on that at the end of the presentation. But the first thing that we're going to talk about is the difference between these two things of what is normal aging. Okay, this should happen and I don't have to worry about, or what is something that I should be concerned. So some of the myths around that is that, let's say, I've heard people say, having a little touch of dementia is a typical part of aging. Dementia is not normal. There's nothing normal about dementia. I've heard a lot about senile dementia, something that because you're aging, it's normal and it should happen. And that's actually not true. We cannot normalize dementia. This shouldn't happen. And there's plenty of people that age gracefully, with dignity, and they don't have dementia. And so something that has happened is that we have normalized what looks like dementia a little bit as something that's just an old age issue, and it isn't. The reality is that we do know the difference between normal aging and abnormal aging. And so some of the things about the disease that we do know is that Alzheimer's disease is a progressive disease. It's a disease of the brain. It's called neurodegenerative condition that advances slowly and starts to destroy some cells in your brain. And that causes some changes in thinking, in your memory, and your behavior. Dementia is used as a general umbrella term, kind of like cancer. So if you hear the word dementia, is the same as cancer, right? It's a terminology that describes what is decline in cognitive functioning when you're aging. And, as much as there's different types of cancer, there's different types of dementia. There's dementia of Alzheimer's, which is the one we're going to focus on today. And there's dementia of Lewy bodies, dementia, frontotemporal dementia, vascular dementia. And the reality is that each one has a different pattern of presentation. So I want to have that clear. What we're going to talk about today is mainly the patterns of progression of an Alzheimer's disease type dementia. And Alzheimer's is the most common type. one of the myths that we hear is if you have memory loss, that means I have for sure Alzheimer's disease or dementia. And the reality is that a lot of people have a hard time with their memory. I certainly do. I certainly have an issue sometimes with remembering getting to the grocery store, and I didn't quite write it down. So I come back, and the other day I went to get food for my dogs, and I came back without food for my dogs. And it was the main thing I went to the grocery store to do. And so memory loss is actually quite normal. It happens. Distractions make us forget. Inability to pay attention too well, that can make us forget. But it doesn't mean that it's what you should think of if there's someone with memory loss. They most certainly have dementia. And the reality is that we do know how to distinguish between those two things. The way that we distinguish memory loss, that is normal part of aging, and Alzheimer's related, is that the Alzheimer's related looks more like amnesia, right? So it's very rapid forgetting. It's meeting people, and within 5 minutes we forget who they are. It's so clear that it's not normal. Let's say that I went to the grocery store, I got there, I forgot my dog's food, came back. But when I came back, I remember that I forgot something, right? And so that ability to, even after long periods of time, to remember on your own, that's a sign that it isn't something related to Alzheimer's. People with Alzheimer's are not able to cue themselves to remember things. And so that's one of the things that we're pretty certain and that we use to differentiate those. Some of the risk factors that we do know is that age is one of the primary risk factors, right? So if you're 65 years old and older, and then if you are a woman, women tend to live longer. And so we're just more at risk. There might be other things why we are the group that is where it's most predominantly diagnosed, dementia in general, and the Alzheimer's specifically. And we're studying that. We're looking at what that could be. Another myth is, okay, if it runs in my family, I'm for sure gonna get Alzheimer's. And so let me go do a genetic testing. I'm 34 and I'm gonna go and I'm just gonna go to the doctor and say, you know what, I just want to know. The reality is that those are not that accurate in the way that we think about it. There are people that have been tested and they have the gene. There's multiple genes, right, that we've identified, and they have one of those genes. And the reality is that they never develop symptoms of Alzheimer's. And so we have that information. We do know that in absence, just looking at genetic testing doesn't tell us if we're going to have Alzheimer's. And so a lot of doctors actually don't find genetic testing medically necessary, and so they won't order it, right? And paying out of pocket for that, it's quite expensive. And it really is not something that we're encouraging right now. So these are some of the genetics of Alzheimer's. And so there's a gene ApoE4. It is linked to greater risk of what is called late onset Alzheimer's disease. We do know that from the dementia, it's most common, right? From all the dementias, Alzheimer's is most common, and it is associated with old age. And we also know that even though you can go get a genetic testing or go to a genetic counselor, you can do it. What we're saying is it's not certainty. There's no certainty in getting those tests. The body-brain connection. So there are things that we can do about reducing some of those risks. So our health. And I know that we hear from all our doctors, from our moms, from our dads, from our grandfathers, grandmothers, from everyone around us. And hopefully, yes, we are bombarded with that message that we have to eat well. We have to take care of our bodies and keep active, and not just work out and, that kind of exercise, just active socially. When we say an active social life, we don't mean that you have to go and be a social butterfly. It just means that you need to connect with people, because when we connect with other people, friends, even if it's a limited amount of friends, our mind is engaged. And if our mind is engaged, that's good for our brain. We do know that the risk for Alzheimer's increases with heart issues, right? So any heart condition. And it is associated to something called a vascular dementia. There is increased risk for that. But specifically, you want to make sure that you take care of your heart, eat a heart healthy diet, and that if you do have medical conditions, doesn't mean you're going to develop Alzheimer's either. It means you have to take your medicine. You have to make sure you go to your appointments. Same for diabetes. And so there is a higher risk for Alzheimer's for people who have diabetes. It doesn't mean that because you have diabetes, you're most certainly going to end up getting Alzheimer's. It just means you should take care of it. And there is a link with head injuries and dementia. And it's most of the time with repeated head injuries. Repeated head injuries tend to be a little bit associated to risk for dementia, but it doesn't mean that if I had one accident in my life, or I have, just one instance or two even, that I will definitely get dementia. It means that repeated head injuries tend to do have an increased risk for Alzheimer's or dementia. So we're going to jump now on what are the 10 warning signs. So when it comes to memory changes that disrupt daily life, there's some things that you want to watch out for. So forgetting something that you recently learned, and it doesn't mean something that you learned once, right? Let's say something that you actually learn, and then you try to learn it again, and then you try to learn it again, and you persisted, and you're not able to actually consolidate that information. So that is what we mean when something is not quite right with your memory. And what happens is, if you can't learn new things, it kind of gets in the way of life. Asking the same information over and over, or relying on memories or family members for things that you used to handle on your own is a sign that there might be something happening with your memory, and that you might want to go to your doctor and ask for an assessment.
Well, I have a strategy I'm supposed to use. I have a hard time remembering to do it. But I have an apron, and I have a tape recorder that I can stick in one pocket, and a pad and a pencil in the other. And if I would just really be good at using that, I'd be in better shape. But that's my strategy for trying to remember what I wanted to do and what people said to me and that kind of thing.
So strategies, sure. As we age, we are encouraged, and I do it. I've learned how to use all kinds of technologies on my phone. It took me a while, but I knew I needed it. I would certainly not have forgotten that I was going to get food for my dogs if I would have put it on a reminder or just a list. So it's not bad that we rely on memory aids or any sort of kind of thing that facilitates that we are keeping track of things. It's not a bad thing. Now, what they're saying and what we say when it comes to Alzheimer's is that even when you try and keep track of information, and you grab pieces of paper and you write things all over the house, and you still are unable to remember that you put it in a piece of paper, and where that paper is, or even recall that was something that you put in, you were able to write on a note. Your inability to recall cues is something that would be a little bit more alarming. And it is the difference between healthy aging, right, or a healthy aging sign, or an Alzheimer's sign. So other challenges would be with planning or solving problems. So something like following a plan problems working with numbers, problems following recipes, which this one I'll give an example in a second. Difficulty keeping track of bills, challenges concentrating or taking longer than before to do common tasks. A family recipe, think about it for someone in your home. If they were used to doing all the cooking and they were really good, right? My grandma was actually good at baking, and just from the top of her head, she could just remember recipes. And so if you see that they're no longer able to do what they usually were able to do, then that's a sign that there's something that's concerning. Keeping track of bills is hard. I certainly have a hard time with it, and I am very grateful that we have automatic payments and all those things. But if you were the person that was keeping track of bills in your home, if you were the manager of the home, right, and the CEO of the household, then if there's something that you're no longer able to do that you used to master really well, then that's something that you want to pay attention to. Completing familiar tasks. Completing familiar tasks, something like driving. With driving, it's more about navigation at first. And so it's getting to the right home, is remembering, places that you used to drive to all the time. And for some reason, you're no longer able to. Or they find themselves getting lost, going to the grocery store that they usually were able to go to with no problem. Following rules and doing things right that they were able to do before with no problem is something that's concerning. So we're going to hear from Joyce.
The biggest challenge is in reading and in doing simple tasks like just counting change. That's really hard for me. I can balance a checkbook. If someone gives me a series of coins, I have a hard time really figuring out how much change I should get. That's so, for somebody with a PhD, that's like crazy. And I think it's hard for me to come to grips with that.
So confusion with time and place. People that do live with Alzheimer's can lose track of dates, seasons, the passage of time. They may have trouble understanding some of the things that are happening in their immediate space, right? So they may forget where they are or how they got there, which it can be scary, right? If you're driving around. But getting confused about the day of the week, for example, or not remembering right away, that it's the 12th, it's 13th. Wait, what was the date today? That's actually normal. And it's not something that we would be concerned about if we're able to figure it out later on, right? So most of the things that we're saying, it would be something that you would be able to correct on your own. An example of this, as well as what would be visual images and spatial relationships, would be remembering to find things around the house. So I forget where I left my keys all the time. I'm terrible for that. And I know I should have a specific designated space for it, but I keep forgetting where I left them. And so the reality is that could be a normal sign. What is an abnormal sign is your ability to track back on your steps and find that item that you're looking for. Is your ability to remember, okay, I came in, had my purse, so let me check my purse. And so it's not there. Where did I go next? Oh, I went to the laundry room. And then I see my keys at the laundry room. So your ability to go back in time and track your steps, right, to try and locate something is something that would be normal. If you're unable to do that, then that's something that we would be concerned about, your ability to correct yourself. when it comes to visual surroundings, there are some changes specifically with our ability to, with our visual spatial abilities. And so one of them is with judging distances, right? And determining color or contrast. So if you have someone in your home that is showing some of these signs, it's why they suggest that you don't have anything where you step in or a very obvious, some people put tape, color tape between stairs in like the edge of the stairs, so that they can see the contrast better. And so that's something that does happen early on. Some of the other things are language issues, but so far, I want to say one of the main things that it's why we started with that is memory loss. It is confusion, and it is a difficulty with time. And some of those things are actually happening very early on compared to even other types of dementia. They're very characteristic of Alzheimer's. And so when it comes to other things that start to happen, maybe it is early, but a little bit later on, it would be language issues. And some of those language problems look like difficulty tracking conversations, problems with word finding, calling things the wrong name. Again, and I do that. We all do that, right? We all stay stuck with like, what was the name of that thing? Oh my God, what is that name? And that's actually normal. What is not normal is that even when you have these difficulties with finding the right word, that they're frequent, perhaps even daily, and that when you actually see the object, you're able to recall the name. That would be normal. Someone that has some more difficulties, and it's a sign, it's a warning sign, is when they see the object, they don't know the name. Even seeing it, touching it did not bring back or help recall that word. Conversations, when it comes to conversations, yes, it's hard to keep track of conversations sometimes. It requires your attention, your full undivided attention, that hopefully nothing in the environment was kind of interfering with our ability to pay attention to it. And so it's okay to have difficulty tracking conversations. The problem is when you have been able to have a full conversation, let's say an hour worth with a friend on the phone, and you're no longer able to remember any of the things that you spoke. And maybe some of the things that you were talking about with that friend were actually quite meaningful. Maybe it was a birth, or it was someone's marriage, someone got engaged, right? Or something, like a job loss, a big thing that you would have been able to remember. And if the conversation went for longer, that would be something that you should be able to remember. So if those are the kinds of difficulties that you're having, that would be concerning. So anything that where you're having trouble either following or joining a conversation, as well as some problems with finding the right word, is the accumulation of all these issues, right, that should be concerning.
My sister, who lives
Sorry, I want to hear about
my sister,
Joyce.
who lives in North Carolina, I live in New York. I sent her an email, and apparently she showed it to my brother-in-law, and she called me and said that email made no sense at all. And one of the things that I neglected to tell you was that I would do write emails, things that normally took me about 2 minutes to do. It would take me a half an hour, 45 minutes, and I'd have to read it over, and there was no guarantee it was okay. So I had another person at work read over it, and so it was hard. It was hard, and that's when I realized I thought my emails were fine. Then my sister started telling me, and everybody. So I said, it's not. Things aren't coming out right.
But notice how Joyce mentions that she was having an issue in her at work, and other people had to point it out. She wasn't able to catch that. She wasn't able to fix it or get feedback and improve on it, right? Because we all make mistakes and we all have difficulty with day-to-day stuff. And that is the difference between a sign that it's pointing to something more than just normal aging. So some of the things I've already mentioned is something like misplacing things and not being able to find them, retracing your space, being able to retrace your steps, putting things in places where it's unusual, like a wallet, sure, in a fruit bowl, but in the refrigerator. And it's the accumulation of that. We're not talking about one time something happened or every 6 months, or this is something that is happening at least daily, if not weekly, to the point where it is becoming an issue with your day-to-day life. It is intrusive of your functioning. It isn't. Joyce probably a little bit after that had to quit her job. So it is at that point where we have to look at it and say, this is quite intrusive, right? And this is quite something that it is new to her life, and she used to do really well. And that's the kind of thing that we want to pay close attention to. Decrease or poor judgment. So some of the things that we say when it comes to that is we might not see that early on in the way that we think about it, right? This is not someone that is being aggressive. It's usually shown as what we call social niceties, right? So you see someone, they don't remember, they're gonna try and say something that doesn't feel like it's inappropriate. And so because they have well-preserved social niceties, it's something that kind of goes unnoticed, and that's an issue, right? Early on, specifically for Alzheimer's. And so some of the things where we can catch it is when it comes to money, when it comes to weird phone calls that we get, and we all get them, right, from telemarketers, and them giving them a big, large amount of money. Spending without a purpose is something that's actually very common. Or wearing inappropriate clothing for the weather or season. It could be that it got real cold. They woke up that day. They might think it's still summer. They go out the door and they're not wearing their coats. So yes, when it comes to decreased or poor judgment, it's something that it's not like we would think that it's quite obvious, but it's something that's very subtle. And it will increase over time. Social activities, we're encouraging people to know that they don't have to be social butterflies. We all have different personalities, and our personalities don't change because we got Alzheimer's, right? But as a result of someone that is living with Alzheimer's, some of those changes might look like, I'm having a hard time having conversations, and I can tell. And so I might actually withdraw from participating in the things that I used to. Hobbies, social activities, other engagements. And so I might have a hard time just participating in activities that I used to enjoy. And it looks like a little bit of apathy. And like they don't want to do things that they get pleasure out of, or that they used to get pleasure out of. When it comes to normal signs of aging, it's okay to feel uninterested. It's okay to not want to go to a social obligation or a family gathering. What we can see when it comes to normal aging is when we do see a decrease in social activities or social engagement, it's usually because of other things that are not related to the dementia, but depression. And it could be just a sign that, they're a little down and they don't wanna participate in things, but it doesn't mean that they have Alzheimer's. And so when it comes to asking your doctor, that's what you want to say. You want to clarify why you don't want to participate in those activities or encourage your loved one to do so. And a simple evaluation, a simple cognitive evaluation can clear the difference. We can clear up the difference between what we call a pseudo dementia, which is just depression in old age, sometimes looks like dementia when it's not. Or the reality of it is an actual thinking problem. They can't participate anymore. And so this looks like it is something like Alzheimer's. Some of the changes in mood and personality do happen. And so they usually look like confusion. I would be confused too. They look like suspicion. Maybe I'm not wrong and someone else is actually messing with my finances because I can't be wrong. Maybe someone's interfering and doing things with my accounts. Maybe fear. I'm afraid to get lost because I got lost last week. And so I'm actually concerned. Even Joyce at work, right? Sending emails and the wrong email can mean a big mistake. And so things like anxiety and agitation, these are all signs that there's something that needs to be said to your doctor. So what can you do? If you see one of these signs, something that you can do is just tell your doctor. And so let me explain a little bit, or let Susan talk about her experience.
I would hope that families could be gentle but straightforward. I would hope that they wouldn't minimize the challenge of this or make it larger than it needs to be. So I guess I would say you have to be aware that changes are coming, but they're coming, inch by inch and sometimes foot by foot. But most often, you just have to talk about it. Not to be afraid to talk about it, not to be worried about how to talk about it, but talk about it. Because if you don't, I think that there's going to be 1 or 2 days where you just find there are arresting moments and you have no idea where to put that or how to manage that. Not to be afraid, just to talk.
Not to be afraid. It sounds easier said than done, but it is that. And it starts with showing up to these kinds of talks. And it does start with asking questions early on. Early on. We want our college students to know that if you get checked early, it matters. Early detection matters. If you notice one or more signs of yourself or another person, it can be difficult to know what to do. But, having a neutral stance is not going to be helpful. Being proactive and going to your doctor and saying, let me voice my worry. This is happening. I don't know where to place this. Is this normal? Is it not normal? So if you have a fear, something upsetting you, talk it out. Maybe not even with your doctor, but talk it out with other people around you. Make sure you mention that. We're encouraging that people are more vocal about it, right? To decrease that stigma that we started on early on during this presentation, talking about how we're trying to break that stigma. And this is how we do it. We do it by having conversations. Just like we would if I said that I see a spot on my skin. And if, anyone has thought of getting checked and how does that look like? Maybe I'll ask my friends, did you ever get a spot that didn't look right and you went to the doctor? And so if we're having those conversations, there's no reason why we're not having the conversations about our thinking and how our memory is and how do we feel about our day-to-day? Are we being productive? If we're not, why? So all of those conversations are important. Some of the myths around getting diagnosed is that there is a point about getting diagnosed early on. If we get diagnosed early on, we can actually try to do something about it. There are medications. I'm going to mention some of them. I'm going to skip a little bit of this just for time. There are medications, and usually they're the cholinesterase inhibitors, and they aren't going to stop the disease progression. Let me be clear about the medications that we do have. They're not going to stop the disease. It doesn't stop. We don't have a cure, and we actually don't have a disease modifying medication. The FDA is reviewing a medication right now called aducanumab, and they will have an answer, and they're looking at it, and they're seeing if this is an actual medication that will impact the people that are living with Alzheimer's. Because just like something like Parkinson's, right? We do have medications that are disease modifying. We are getting closer to that. That's what we do. We fund research that will move the needle and push things forward, so that we do have a medication. But if we didn't get an early detection and that medication gets approved next year, it won't help. We can't help it, right? We won't have it available to that person if it gets discovered in the next 3 weeks. Right now, there's science is working really hard on them, but we have to detect early because of that, because we are working on treatment. But the only way that we know that we'll have success is if we are able to get detection early. Let's talk about a little bit of diagnosis.
And he actually, for 6 months, called this mild cognitive impairment. And I kept seeing him every 6 months, and he finally, maybe the second visit or the third visit, he said, I hate to tell you this, but you are early onset Alzheimer's. And I asked him why he didn't say that in the first meeting, and he said to me, a lot of doctors are too fast about assuming that's what it is without further testing, because you can have the symptoms and it can come from the drugs you're taking. And they can take you off those drugs and your mind will be fine. And there's other things that can happen to give you the symptoms of early set Alzheimer's, and it really isn't. It can be corrected. And he just wanted to be sure before he did anything.
There is something called mild cognitive impairment. It is a diagnosis that we are able to detect during what it's called the neuropsychological exam. So these are the basic steps. You go to your doctor, they do a physical exam, mental status exam, basic PCP, primary care doctor will do that. And then they say, I detect something on these exams that I did, and I want you to see a neurologist. They'll send you to a neurologist, and then the neurologist will take it from there. They might do brain scans or the neuropsychological evaluation, and then they'll determine a diagnosis. We've actually gotten really, really good in the last 10 years with early detection and being specific. And so what he was mentioning is something called mild cognitive impairment, which is this earlier diagnosis that we're able to give so that we keep an eye on something every 6 months or every year to see if it's progressing and if we've crossed the threshold, right, of what we would consider an Alzheimer's diagnosis. And it is important. It is important because we can start medication maybe as early as that. Even the cholinesterase inhibitors, we can start early on. And so all of that is important for people to know. So some of the things that physicians tend to test for, and sometimes the neurologist more specifically, are other things that could be causing an issue. It could be alcohol use. It could be as simple as anemia or vitamin deficiencies that can explain that, or other infections, right? There are infections of the brain that can be treated. And there are other forms. They will make their differential diagnosis and eliminate, what other thing could be. So basically, if you do get diagnosed, right, with dementia, where do you go and what do you do? So the maximum benefit of the treatments that we have available is that we start early. And I can't say that enough. Early. We have to start early. If you want to participate in clinical trials, you have to, most of the time, a lot of the times, it's better if it's early in the disease process.
Early diagnosis is very important, because it's like with anything, if you start early, you'll have more success in the treatment of it. And with Alzheimer's, there is no cure, but it can be made livable. You know, the medication can help you live a more productive life with it.
So these are the medications that I was talking about, and some of them may temporarily improve some of the symptoms, not the disease, right? We're not saying that we have medication that stop the progression, but they improve the symptoms. And so it's important, though, to identify early on. With an early diagnosis, there are many things you can do. You can plan for how you want to be taken care of, living arrangements, your safety, your financial aspects of your daily life, legal matters, your transportation. How do I move around if I'm not going to be able to drive? And you can be the person empowered in making those decisions. The person living with the disease can make those decisions, but only if we're able to get that information early on. Planning for the future is something that we say, and we have to say it, you know, to our college students and even earlier than that, right? If we're planning for our future for something like grad school and our careers, we have to plan for the future for how we age and what we want to happen legally, where are, you know, my assets going, and if, you know, I need a legal document, how does it look like? How much is that? And, you know, my finances or properties, who's going to manage those? And so all those conversations should happen early on, if not way earlier than having a diagnosis, an early diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And we do have resources. I'm going to take some questions now. These are some of them. And if you would like to get more information, I'm happy to send it over to you guys. And one of the main things that we do have, and please be encouraged to use, is the 24/7 helpline. There's counselors available all day, every day, and it's 1-800-272-3900. Any questions?
I have a
There are
question.
no questions. Okay.
Dr. Garcia, I have a question. Everybody has a family member, including myself, who is stubborn. And, you know, if I suspect something or my brother suspects something, but that particular family member doesn't, you know, says, no, 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 there's nothing wrong. Like you always have one that doesn't have a lot of self-awareness. Is our only recourse that if when that family member goes to a doctor, that the doctor will, you know, pick up something, or do we legally have a right to call the doctor, you know, and say, I'm concerned about something? How does that work legally?
I mean, this is a reality. You are allowed to do whatever you want. If you want to call that doctor and let them know, hey, I know that my sister has an appointment, a checkup with you coming up, because she told me she's not letting me come to that appointment with her. But I want the doctor to know that this is a concern. The family has this concern. Let's say you find the doctor, your sister disclosed the name of the doctor in the clinic, you give them a phone call. Their job is to say, we can't disclose any of the information of if that person is or isn't a patient of theirs. And you say, that's fine, I'm just letting you guys know. And the doctor will have to take that information in. You know, that nurse might relay that message that someone called with that kind of concern, and they're going to have to make sure that they do what's in the best interest of their patient. And so they're not going to ignore information, right, that is concerning. They might actually bring it up, or they might decide to not do that. And so what I would suggest is to not go behind your loved one, because it won't help either way. If there is something wrong, it won't help with a buy-in later on. And so we want to get a buy-in usually. And the best way to do that is to be non-threatening with that information. So that's always the best way to do it. I know that depending on, a sibling or a family member that has a very strong personality, that might not be the best way. And so then you do have to take a different route, a more aggressive way of approaching so that you keep them safe. You could consult with a lawyer, and they'll provide you information on if you have concern for their well-being and their safety. It's completely real and absolutely something that you should do. If we do it for our children to make sure that they're safe, and we grab the phone and we call CPS, right? Child Protective Services, there's no reason we're not doing it with adults who we are concerned about too, right? Which would be APS. So there are multiple ways to be a little bit more aggressive, but the suggestion is to always start with the least confrontational strategy, which is to maybe just have a chat, have a conversation, maybe find a way in, right, to that appointment. I myself need to go to a doctor, but I'm kind of trying to find a new one. Do you mind if I go? You said that she's really good. Can I go to your next appointment, right? And so when you mention it, you do it in front of them, maybe not behind their backs as much. There's different ways. There's not a one-way road to a question like that because everyone's different and their circumstances are different. And so what you're seeing, though, in this conversation we just had, is what our 24/7 helpline counselors do day to day. They get a call about, my God, what do I do with this and where do I go? And it's a little bit of like coaching, right? Of things that you can try. And so if that didn't work, call me again after you try that and let's figure it out. Because the amount of things that caregivers will have to do on a daily basis should be for a professional to handle. And so what we want to make sure is that you guys, caregivers or anyone, is prepared to make those decisions and that we are a support to you and the decisions that you're making.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very helpful. Any questions, Lee?
Yes, there's one question. They're saying, is this something screened for at a certain age, or do you do it when you or someone else notices an irregularity?
This is something that you can mention to your doctor as early as you see it, because the reality is that we do have something called an earlier an earlier onset Alzheimer's. It's super rare, very rare, that we see someone 45 years old, 40 years old with Alzheimer's, but it happens. There's actually a gene that we've been able to find that's specifically associated to something like that happening, but it's super rare. It's not a common thing. So technically, you can ask your doctor. As long as you see something that's concerning, you should ask them. What I want to say is, don't feel like it's too early to ask questions. It's not. Even if you're 30, and you have a PCP that you like and you've seen for 10 years, and you want to tell them, is your expertise aging? Like, is this something you do? I've heard of something called a mental status exam. Do you do them? And they might say, no, actually, I don't do those. Then maybe when you turn 40, you want to change your primary care doctor, and you ask them, is there someone you would recommend? As I'm getting older, I want someone that can do those. But it's about having the conversation. There's nothing wrong about asking questions. Any other one?
Not currently.
Cool.
You sort of answered this. Is there a way other than going to the doctor, like on your site, do you have any tests you can take if you're concerned about the fact that you put something in your refrigerator that wasn't supposed to be there?
Absolutely, we do. We have what's called the community. Let me see if I can find it in my presentation. It looks like we don't have it in here, but it's the Community Resource Finder. If you just type Community Resource Finder, oh, there it is. You can find, it's like a directory. You can find respite care. You can find neurologist, a neuropsychologist, a psychiatrist. You can find all kinds of people. and you just type in your zip code. Doesn't matter what part of the country you're in, you can find it, because we are in every state, right? We have a chapter in every state, and all of our services are the same in all states. And so, yes, you can go in and you can put in your zip code, and you can find the doctors that do that in your area.
Thank you. Thank you. I also want to know if you would be able to go ahead and put your URL for your site. We'll put that in the comments so that if someone thinks question after this, then they can go ahead and have something to contact you. So we'll put that in. Okay.
Yes. And right now, if you do want to, it's just alz.org. It's as simple as alz.org, and you're going to find our website.
Okay, great. Lee, anything else?
No, not currently.
Okay. Well, Dr. Oh, your name is so hard to pronounce. Bessariel. Dr. Bessariel. Um, we want to thank you so much for taking your time out today to come and talk to us about this very important subject. It's giving us a lot of information when we are with families this holiday season, and also for ourselves who are, getting over that 40-year-old point there. So, we really appreciate you taking that time to come out and talk with us today. If anyone has any other questions that you think about, make sure that you put that in the comment section. You can also email us at referencerequest@ctcd.edu, and Lee can go ahead and put that in our comment section as well. If you have any questions about today's PowerPoint, or if you'd like a copy, maybe we can convince you to give us maybe a copy of it, or just have some information and get you in touch with the Alzheimer's Association chapter here. Thank you again. Make sure that you guys check out all the library events that we have on our library website. We want to keep you guys coming because we have wonderful speakers, and we truly appreciate it. So everybody, you guys have a really great day today, and we will see you at our next event. So thank you, and thank you again. Bye. Bye, Lynn.